I might be a villain, but at least I wear my true self on my sleeve. Not like you do, hiding and pretending to be a fucking hero. You're not meant to be the strongest alpha. Theo growled at Aaron, his eyes blazing red. So let that little human of yours go and end the ritual before it's too late. If you plan to harm Zera, you will have to go through me. She needs more protection from you than anyone else. You have taken everything she loves away from her, and you're not done yet. He snarled, his teeth gritted and his fist clenched. All you ever do is lie, Aaron yelled back, his own fists balling. This may not have been a physical confrontation, but they could still do damage to each other. Oh, but you know I tell the truth. If Zera knew the truth about who you are and what you've done, she'd be running away from you as fast as she can. Aaron's eyes snapped open as the memory that felt like yesterday replayed in his head. Theo had said those words to him 4 weeks ago when Ivan had dream-walked with him into the rebellion territory to ask them to back down from their attack on his pack. Theo told him he would rather die than give in, and instead asked him to end the ritual and let Zera go. Theo's accusations of his character made no sense to him, not until Tatiana's death. He had never drowned in his own thought before, but he was literally choking underneath the cold water as it poured out on his skin. All the voices that had always judged, criticized, and mocked him were back and in full force. He hadn't given into his thoughts since the accident, and in a moment of vulnerability under the shower, he had, and now regretted that decision. There was no way of getting answers, as the truck driver who had left Zera in this horrible state had taken his own life immediately after the accident before Ivan could get to him. The rebellion pack once again had played a dangerous game and came up victorious, rendering him powerless and desperate. They knew how weak he'd be without Zera, and they went for her. Without the completion of the ritual, he had only a few years left. All this would have been avoided had he told Zera the truth weeks ago when he found out. Aaron stepped out of the bathroom and changed into the pair of clothes Ivan got. A black jean and a gray shirt. He hated the way they held on to him, but these clothes were better than the previous bloody clothes he had on earlier. He made his way out of the bathroom and back into the waiting room, where he saw Damor and Zion, along with Aiden Smith and Ivana Ame, 2 betas of the Dominion pack, and Elena, Zion's nanny. "Daddy?" Zion called out on seeing him, breaking out of Damor's hold and running towards him. Aaron stooped low and picked his son into his arms, delighted to see something positive in the last few hours. He smiled. "Thank you for bringing him," he said to Damor, who stood unmoved at the corner of the room. "It's the very least I can do, brother," Damor replied, adding a nod. "How are you, Daddy?" Zion asked, his eyes trying to find out the truth hidden in his eyes. "I'm doing okay." "Why are we at the hospital, and where is Mommy?" "Uncle Damor wouldn't tell me," he stated, his eyes sad. "He said she's away." Pain flickered in Aaron's eyes as he glanced at Damor before looking back at Zion. He tried to keep his emotions as tucked away as possible. He couldn't tell Zion the unfortunate fate that had befallen his mother. He couldn't look into his eyes and tell him his mother had been involved in a horrible accident, which had left her in a terrible state in the ICU. Telling Zion he was at the hospital because of Zera would only bring up more questions from the little boy. He had to be strong for his son in this trying time, no matter what. So he looked for an excuse to give. "Your Uncle Damor is right. Mommy had to go away for a while. Will she come back?" He didn't know the answer to the question, but he had to give him one. "Yes." Zion's eyes narrowed at his words, as if not believing the words coming from his mouth. "She didn't say goodbye," he revealed, and his eyes dropped remorsefully. "She said to tell you she would be back in no time, so there was no need for goodbyes," he said. Aaron's eyes lifted, and he saw Elena standing not so far away from Damor in the waiting room. "Uncle Damor and Elena will keep you safe until Ivan and I return, okay?" He nodded in understanding, and Aaron leaned in and placed a tender kiss on his temple before dropping him to his feet. Elena walked over to them and took hold of Zion's hand and led him away. The 2 betas followed behind for protection. The little boy turned around one last time and waved at Aaron before disappearing through the door. Damor set to take his leave, but Aaron placed his hand on his shoulder, stopping him. "I know this is a heavy burden placed on you. Running the pack, taking care of the estate, and then looking after Zion. He started, but didn't get to finish. I will do all that for you in a heartbeat, and without regret, he answered, his voice filled with conviction. Thank you. Ivan told me everything. I am sorry, Damore said, and Aaron shook his head. Will she make it through? He sighed. I don't know, Damore. All I have is hope. This time, Damore placed his hand on Aaron's shoulder for reassurance, then hold on to it. The day had barely begun when Aaron heard Lionel's torn voice charging through from far away, and he stopped counting. He was at the hospital, and this was earlier than expected. Aaron thought he might begin his journey this morning and arrive here later in the day. When Ivan had called yesterday to inform Ceci about the incident, she told him Lionel was going with Betty back to the state to have Tatiana's body laid to rest. Ivan shared the sad news with Ceci, who couldn't guarantee Lionel would take the news well. Losing Tia was hard enough, adding Zera to it would completely crush him. Still, he had to know, and she promised she would tell him as soon as Tatiana's body was laid to rest. From Lionel's arrival at the hospital now, it was obvious he set out to come over as soon as he received the news. What floor are they on? Aaron heard him ask. It's 4 a.m., Lionel. You've barely had any sleep and you've been driving all night. Can you take a rest? That's not the answer to the question I asked, Ceci, he fumed. She sighed. She's on the 6th floor, and I can get you there faster if you hold on to me. No, I want to feel every step. I want to feel every moment and every pain. I don't want you to make it better, he answered with a shaky voice. Aaron heard no other word for the next 3 minutes, and when the ding sound of the elevator went off, he heard footsteps approaching at a closer pace. Ivan, who had been asleep a while ago, had now woken up. He must have sensed the familiar presence. Aaron didn't sleep. He couldn't. Instead, he paced around and did a mental counting up. He knew only nightmare and torture waited for him in the dream world, and so, as hard as being awake was, he did it with ease. He was in 637,000 paces when he heard Lionel's voice. Ceci and Lionel are here, he told the now awake Ivan, and the next second the two walked in. Aaron stopped pacing, and his eyes lifted to acknowledge them, both looking torn. They both appeared tired and miserable, especially Lionel, and Aaron couldn't fault him. He had buried his younger sister yesterday evening and was now about to lose another. No one could take such a cruel deal at the hands of fate. Ivan got up, walked over to Ceci, and threw his arms around her for a strengthening hug. Lionel finally broke the silence after a minute of entering the room. What happened? Aaron pressed his lips together, a wounded look appearing on his face. He would not sugarcoat it. She was in this state because of him, and there was no other reason. I failed to protect her, was all he could say. Well, Ceci said she was in a terrible state, and I think I'm going to need a better explanation than I failed to protect her, Aaron. Lionel growled, stepping towards him. I am sorry. Zera found out the truth about Levi Adam, your father, and fled before I could stop her. Lionel knew the truth. He had told him after discovering it 2 weeks ago. He couldn't keep it to himself and act like a saint to the family he hurt. Lionel had advised he holds on to the truth until Tia's burial. That's what he did, and that plan backfired. I was going to tell her as planned, but Nicole beat me to it. She did what she did with the intent to get to Zera, and it worked. His eyes turned red as he tried to control the sad emotions on his face, and his hands grew hairier and his claws grew longer. I should have stopped her, but I didn't want her to hate me more than she already did, and so I let her go. I failed her, I failed you, and I failed Zion. Aaron, you're bleeding, Ceci said, and at her words, the eyes of the other 2 men in the room dropped to Aaron's fist to find blood dripping from it and onto the floor. He unclenched his fist and dragged a deep breath. It's nothing. Ceci turned to Ivan, her brows narrowing. He isn't back to self-harming, is he? He's here, listening, Aaron answered with his voice not too pleased that they had taken their focus from the important matter, Zera, unto him. Letting your rage get to the point of harming yourself will not change the course of things, you know, Ivan told him. He knew that, but rage was the best channel for his emotion over sadness. He needed the balance. We are already miserable about what happened to Zera. We cannot be worried for you as well, Ceci scolded him. While they had yet spoken, the doctor who had gone into the ICU with Zera when she came in many hours ago walked in. The 4 people in the waiting room approached the doctor, who had just come in. "How is she?" Lionel asked. "Is she out of the woods yet?" Ceci asked. "Can we see her?" Aaron asked. "Do you have good news?" Ivan asked. They all had eyes of expectancy as they stared at the doctor, waiting for the answer to their various questions. The middle-aged doctor gave them all weary eyes and shook his head to answer all their questions. "We have done all we can, but we cannot guarantee she would live past the evening. Her heart is failing at a rate we've never seen before, and it's hard to sustain," he answered. Aaron's heart broke in his chest, and he stepped back. Everything the doctor said after his first sentence, he didn't listen to. The last piece of hope he had was gone, and Zera would not make it past the evening. He needed to see her. He stormed out of the waiting room, heading toward the ICU where Zera had been kept. He heard the panic call of the nurses, but he didn't turn to look at them. They weren't important, only Zera was. He pushed a push door of the ICU, and there laid the unconscious body of Zera on the bed in the hospital. Johnny gown. Her head now had a large bandage on it, covering most of her face up. The exposed side of her face, which he saw, looked pale. Although the nurse had cleaned the blood on her face while prepping her for surgery, she still had cuts on her forehead, cheeks, and lower lips, and blood coated a little below her chin. The tears he had done so well to control these past hours ran down his face, and he cried out bitterly in pain, and his hands balled into a fist. "We can't lose her." He heard Lionel say from behind, and he turned to see him with his eyes red and swollen. He didn't know how long he had been here, but he didn't ask. "I lost Tia, and I couldn't do anything about it. It hasn't even been a day since we laid her to rest. I can't lose Zera, too." Aaron bit his lips and glanced heavenward. Lionel was hurting, and it wasn't fair. "There is nothing I can do, Lionel." "There is. You're an alpha, the strongest of your kind. There is a lot you can do," he replied. He understood what Lionel asked for, and that was something he couldn't do. "I can't turn her, Lionel. It's so much more complicated than you think." Pio was the wise one of the Dominio pack. He had helped shape him into the man he was before dying and passing on the ability to even. He taught him about the limit and boundaries that existed in the realm of the supernatural. There were limitations to turning a human into a wolf. This was one of those limitations. "And she will die if you don't. Is that what you want for me, yourself, and your son? Do you really think I haven't considered all the options? Don't you think that was the first thing that crossed my mind after seeing her in that car, bruised and unconscious?" He wanted Zera back more than anything, but biting her in this condition might do more harm than good to her. If she woke up and found herself in a horrible state, she would hate him, and he could take anything the world threw at him, but he couldn't bear to live in a world where Zera hated him. "Do you think I would have handed her over to the doctors if Ivan or I could do anything good to remedy her current state? There are boundaries we don't push. There are limits we don't cross, because we do not know what we could unleash in doing so. No one had ever been bitten while unconscious before. If they were, they had been no record of them, but these were some of the things I was warned about as a young alpha wolf. You're right. We will never know, but if Zera could speak now, she wouldn't want to leave her son all alone in this cruel world. I know she would want better for him," he said, and walked away from the room. He agreed with Lionel. Zera was selfless that way, and he loved that about her. He had stood beside Zera's bedside in the last 2 hours, staring at her unconscious body, while Lionel's words replayed in his head. The decision wasn't an easy one, but one that had to be made, regardless. This could kill her or save her, but if he did nothing, she would surely die. He chose to defile the promise he made to Pio to never push the boundaries. "Are you going to do it?" Ivan asked with his eyes fixed on Aaron. Aaron tore his eyes from Zera over to the door where Ivan stood. "I don't know. I know Pio would tell me not to, but I want to take my chances. I'd rather live in a world where she survives and I face the consequences than in a world where she doesn't exist." "You're right. We will not know until we take the step. She might come out as the girl you've always known, only a werewolf, or she might come out completely different. It's a risk you would have to take." Aaron drew a sharp breath and ran a hand through his hair. He knew the probabilities were vast and some out of control, but he had his mind made up. "Then I will leave you to it," Ivan said, and stepped out of the ward. Once again, Aaron and Zera were left alone, and this time he stepped towards her. His legs now felt weak with the heaviness of the decision before him, and he needed to sit. He walked to the seat beside her bed and slumped onto it. He took her icy hand into his and gave it a firm squeeze. "I may never get the chance to say this again, but I need you to know that I am sorry. I may never get the chance to say this again, but I need you to know that I am sorry. Zera, I am sorry for everything. I wish you could believe me and know that I speak the truth. I never meant to hurt you, nor did I desire to see your heart and trust broken. I will always live in regret for what I did to you, for what I did to Levi." Silence dwelt for a while, so the only sound he heard was the heart monitor beeping. "I have taken everything from you, and I am indeed selfish. I hope you know I did everything humanly possible to keep you alive, but all effort has proved useless, and I have no other choice. We cannot say goodbye to you just yet. I know I cannot." As he said those words, his hand holding on to hers transformed from that of a human to that of a furry werewolf. His fingers grew out into white, sharp claws, and he dug them into the skin of her hand. He brought her wrist up to his mouth as his fangs grew out, and he dug them into her wrist, feeling the blood that gushed out on his lips. His tears dropped. He dropped her hand back to her side and withdrew his as it transformed back into its human form. "I hope you someday forgive me." He rose from his seat and leaned in, placing a kiss on her forehead before leaving the room. Zera's lashes pulled apart as her consciousness returned to the loud beeping of the heart monitor standing beside her on the left side. Her eyes did a quick scan of her environment, trying to decipher what could have led her to this moment, but finding no such memory. Where was she, and how did she get here? These questions demanded answers, but the room was void of anyone that could give her the answer. She heard the speeding car down the street as if she wasn't in the ward, and the machine beside her wasn't helping either, and its noise grew with every passing moment. She heard laughter coming from the side of the door, and her eyes darted there. Her head ached with the noise happening around, and it felt as if it would explode the very next second. She pressed her hands to her ears and shut her eyes. This had to be a nightmare, one she would wake up from in no time. But as her eyes opened back up, she was still here, trapped in the room where all the noises were coming from. Her heart raced faster than it had ever gone, and sweat broke out on her face. Becoming fed up, she slammed her hand against the noisy heart monitor, and the machine flew and smashed against the wall, reducing the noise. She sighed. The door opened the next second, and in walked a young nurse, looking to be in her early 30s, in blue scrubs and a notepad in her hand. She realized she was at the hospital. She didn't remember how she got here, but she feared it had to have been something serious. The nurse slowed down on her step at the sight of her, surprised to see her awake. And Zera wondered why she was surprised. The nurse, whose name tag read Abigail, didn't move any closer, and as her eyes saw the machine laying in the room's corner, she panicked and her heartbeat sped up. Zera didn't know why this nurse's heartbeat was racing or why she could hear it so loud, but she needed it to stop because the headache slowly made its way back with the noise. "Your heart is beating too hard. It's giving me a headache," she told the nurse, who now trembled in her stand. "Why are you trembling?" she asked, but all she got in response was silence and a more racing heartbeat. Go call the doctor," she told her, and the nurse scrambled out of the ward at the same second. She thought that was the weirdest thing she ever encountered. The noises had reduced, which was better than before, but her aching head persisted. Hopefully the doctor finds a solution to that, she thought. A few minutes later, the doctor walked in, and just like the nurse, he was much surprised to see her awake. Did something bad happen? She wondered. "Miss Adams, you're awake." "Were you hoping I wouldn't?" She raised a brow at him. He laughed, and it came off nervous in her ears. "Of course not. We always hope for the best with our patients. But your case was quite different. You see, you were involved in a fatal accident and were brought in here. You weren't going to make it through the evening, and Nurse Abigail here came in to take your final recordings before we pull the plugs and found you awake." She had stopped following him after he said a fatal accident. She had a scattered memory of the accident, but she had thought it was a dream, but it wasn't a dream. She had been in a terrible accident, and the doctor already concluded that she would not make it. Here she sat now with no scratch or pain except for the noise-induced headache that she currently experienced. "I will check your vital signs and then inform your family of your recovery. They will all be delighted." She wondered who the family he spoke of was, but she didn't think too much about it. She tried to avoid anything that would cause a strain on her brain and cause more headaches. The doctor moved closer and his eyes caught the heart monitor on the floor in a broken shape, and then he turned to look at her with weary eyes. "Did you do that?" She pressed her lips together and nodded. "Yes, I did. It was noisy," she explained, and though his eyes narrowed on her, he asked no further questions. He ran a few physical tests on her to check all her vital organs and realized she was fine. Then he moved to unwrap her head of the bandage thereon, hoping to check the injury she sustained. When they came off, he examined closely before mumbling, "There is no trace of the wound," to himself. He stepped back and stared at her as if she was an alien. "That's medically impossible," he stated, and just like the nurse earlier, his heartbeat rose at an unsteady rate. "Am I okay, doctor?" she asked, and he nodded. "Yes, it would appear so, but there is no way this could have just happened. It seems like a miracle." He took a step back before saying, "I am glad to still have you here with us. I will inform your family you're awake. We will conduct further tests in the morning," he said, and stepped out of the ward, more like ran. Zera paid little mind to them, and all she wanted now was food and quietness. The doctor walked out of the ward and over to the waiting room where Lionel and Ceci stayed. Lionel paced around in circles, and Ceci sat with her head bowed and arms crossed over her chest. Aaron had gone for a walk after he came out from Zera's ward an hour ago. He was barely himself, and though they worried about him, they couldn't stop him. Ivan decided to follow and keep an eye on him and charged Ceci with the responsibility of keeping an eye out of Zera's ward to make sure only the doctors went in. Lionel was first to notice the doctor and nurse's presence, and he stopped pacing around in a circle and walked towards the door where they stood. "How is she?" he asked, his eager eyes dancing all over the doctor. Ceci rose to her feet and stepped towards the doctor, all prepares to get either good news or bad. "Mr. Adams, Miss Hart," the doctor's voice calls out, "I don't know what sort of miracle happened in the last hour, but the patient is awake." Lionel exhaled in relief, and his eyes fluttered briefly. "Can we see her then?" he asked. "Is Zera awake?" they heard Aaron's voice ask from behind the doctor, and they all turned to him. He bobbed his head. "The injuries she sustained in the accident are mysteriously gone, so I can say she is, but there are a few abnormalities with her. She threw the heart monitor into the wall, destroying the whole thing. Such strength is surreal for someone unconscious an hour ago." He finished before adding, "Please be careful." They wasted no more time before running towards the hall that led to Zera's ward. Lionel, who took the lead, pushed open the ward and walked inside, but there was no trace of Zera in the room. She had yanked at the needle plugged into her arm out and tossed it onto the floor before taking off. "She's gone," Lionel said with a quick gasp. His eyes moved to the damaged heart monitor on the floor at the corner of the room, just like the doctor said before, turning to the hearts behind him. "Fuck!" Aaron cussed out in frustration, throwing a fist at the wall and making the ward shake. Ceci looked up at him, and her eyes told him to stay still. "I have to go after her," he said. "You can't." Ivan spoke up, stepping further into the room. "Is that a threat?" Aaron demanded with his voice rising. Ivan maintained his calmness even as he spoke. "It's an advice. She's a sage, and you're better off staying away from her." "What's a sage?" Lionel asked, turning to Ceci, who stood closest to him. He was the only one hearing the name for the first time, and curiosity appeared in his voice. "It means not a werewolf nor a human, but with the abilities of a werewolf, only deadlier. They have all the strength of a werewolf and have no weaknesses," Ivan explained, turning to him. Her kind are rare and powerful with strength, as never seen before. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Lionel demanded. It can be a good thing if that power is put to good use, and terrible things if it's not. She's capable of unleashing chaos and shaking the realms of the supernatural. Legends have it that the last sage dates back over 100 years ago, and he massacred over a dozen alphas in one night. He, however, helped keep the peace between humans and defended them against werewolves who only wanted to prey on their vulnerability and destroy them. It's how sages are created, Aaron mumbled to himself, and the eyes of the others moved to him. He noticed their lingering gaze. That's why turning a human in a desperate attempt to save their lives was forbidden and always frowned upon. I never understood it, but now I do. I don't understand, Lionel pointed, getting lost with every word. Being turned while trapped between the realm of the dead and the living comes with a risk, many of which we don't fully know. Sages were regarded almost as myth, even amongst supernaturals. Turning her had triggered the birth of a sage for the first time in 100 years. Ivan explained further. All that would be useless if she doesn't learn how to control it. She would endanger many people. I have to do something. I created her. This is on me, Aaron said, walking to the door, but it shut before he could step through, and he knew Ivan had done that. Ivan, stand down, he warned, his voice furious. Ceci placed her hand before Lionel, silently telling him to stay back because she felt a heat coming up. I can't, Ivan said, his hand held out on alert. You put yourself before her and you will die in seconds. Then so be it. He seethed and turned to him, his hand balled into a fist. Ivan stepped forward. That's foolishness speaking, brother. There's a better way around this and no one has to die. But if you go now, we will never get to it. He's right, Ceci spoke up. You need to think about Zion and what your decision might mean to him. He still needs his father, and you may not have forever, but you still have time with him, and you should live it out by his side more than anywhere else. I agree, if Zera is really a sage and dangerous, you might be at a disadvantage with her than anyone else, Lionel said, finally catching on with everything being said. Aaron heaved a deep sigh and ran a hand through his hair. She's out there, confused and alone, with no one to help or lead her. She's not alone, Ivan told him, and he turned to see his brother already dream-walking. Where is she? He asked. Everywhere, he answered. Zera's stomach rumbled, even though she was currently eating pasta and egg sauce. It had been a long night, and she had spent it on the run. Her memories were still scattered all over the place, and the only memory that was consistent was her need to escape. She had heard the voice of Aaron while she was still at the ward and panicked for a bit. She knew she had to get away. The last thing she wanted was to face him. She had a bad feeling just thinking about it, and flight was the next best thing. As the morning came, so did her hunger. Luckily, she met with the chef on his way out of the restaurant, and she told him she needed food. The kind young man had compassion on her despite knowing she had run away from the hospital after noticing her Johnny gown. He brought her the food at the restaurant's backyard, and she thanked him for his help before sitting out to eat the food. However, the more she ate, the hungrier she became, and that didn't help her one bit. She had almost finished eating when she heard footsteps from behind. She spun around and saw a man with blonde hair and blue eyes, wearing a pale blue polo and jeans, approaching. He seemed to be in his late 30s and walked as if he owned the ground beneath his feet. There was a corny smile on the side of his face as he came and stood before her. It is not every day the mentally deranged find their way to the city side, he said in his hoarse voice, making her ear tingle, and not in a good way. Who gave you food? He demanded, but she remained silent, gulping down the rest content in her mouth. Her stomach still rumbled as if she ate nothing. When I ask a question, you answer. I own this property last time I check, he snapped, and she jerked, not from fear but from the noise his loud voice made. She placed her hands to her ears, and her eyes tightly shut. Oh, you're indirectly calling me a noisemaker, you weirdo. He sneered and stepped towards her, grabbing her by the gown she had on. She snapped, and her hand shut up, grabbing the man by the throat and slamming him against the wall. The man struggled to set himself free, but she only tightened her grip around his neck even more. You talk too much, she growled at him, her eyes turning silver. His heartbeat hammered away in his chest as his breathing reduced because of her grip. She wanted to reach in and rip it out. All the nerves in her body told her to. Her stomach growled as if he was the food she needed to eat, and her mouth watered. Her hands rose, and her fingers transformed into long, sharp claws, and she almost dug them into his chest when she heard, "No, don't!" She released the man, and he crashed into the tarred ground, coughing and struggling to breathe. She took to her heels and ran away from there. She didn't know who spoke, but she needed to get away from him. She didn't trust him, and he felt like trouble. She stole a few clothes from the ropes dried outside and changed into them so that no one who saw her would think she ran away from the hospital. With that done, she ran as fast as she could from everything. "Zera!" the voice called after another many hours of running through the woods. She slowed down and fell on her face, then turned around but found no one. "Who's there? Who are you?" she asked, terrified as to what was happening. The voice sounded familiar, but she couldn't wrap her head around it. "Zera, I am a friend." "Where are you?" "Far away, but I know you need me." She rose to her feet and turned around. "You're in my head," she said. "Yes, but I want to help you. Then come out. Make yourself known," she demanded. "I can't, not yet. If you can't show yourself, then I can't trust you. Zera, stay out of my head." "Listen, stay out of my head," she thundered, and immediately the voice disconnected. After a whole day of wandering, she found a memory that stuck, someone that was once in her life, someone she could trust. Daniel. The thought of him didn't trigger any trouble within her, and she knew he had to be safe. If she wanted answers, she had to go to him. She came to the suburban side of the city, where he lived with a heavily beating heart. She watched him fill up his tank with fuel, and after paying, got in and drove off. She followed him, and after 30 minutes of driving, he pulled up at his house. He walked to the boot and opened it up, then pulled out a black bag and a white box. With his hands full, he approached the door of the house. "Can I help you with at least one?" she asked from behind, and she must have scared him because he gasped and dropped both the bag and the box in his hands. Her fast reflex kicked in, and she grabbed the bag and box before they could hit the floor. "Zera!" he called out in a voice overshadowed with panic. "Daniel!" She smiled a little. "What are you doing here?" "I came to look for you," she answered. "I am so sorry I scared you. I just wanted to help." "Why are you here?" "Because I don't know where to go and because I trust you. My mind is foggy and a lot of things aren't making much sense, but I just knew I could trust you. I have a brief memory of things, but I have a few of yours, and with everything I remember, I can trust you." He stayed silent, staring at her as if she had developed 3 horns. "Are you okay?" She shook her head. "No, I'm not. Can we go in now?" "These aren't very heavy, but I'd like to sit down." He eyes the bag and box now in her hand before returning his focus to her. "Yes, sure we can." Zera's stomach rumbled, and her nose caught the smell of blood as she set down the box and bag on the table. Her mouth watered, wanting a taste of the flesh which she just smelt, but she calmed herself and wrapped her arms around her stomach. She stared up and found Daniel's curious eyes on her as he locked the door behind him, and her cheeks heated with embarrassment. "You're hungry," he pointed out, not fussed about it. "Yeah," she nodded, her eyes weary as she stared at him. "What do you want to eat?" he asked, picking the bag on top of the box on the table and heading towards the kitchen. The further he went with the bag, the less blood she smelt. "Meat," she replied, and he halted and turned to her, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Just meat? For now. Do you have that?" "Yeah, I do. I got beef on my way home. It's right here." He nodded and raised the bag in his hand. "I never knew you had a thing for meat. Let me get it ready for you. In the meantime, make yourself feel at home." After 30 minutes of being in the kitchen, he walked out with a plate having about 4 slices of steamed and spiced beef, and he set it down on the dining table. The rumbling of her stomach continued at the sight as she got up from the couch where she had sat and approached him. She sat on the dining chair when she got there, and she picked one up with her hand and took it to her mouth to eat. "Careful, it's still hot," he raised the alarm. She dropped the meat in her mouth at his words, but she didn't feel the pain of being burnt as she should. The hunger must have made her forget how hot it was. She also realized she had been doing a few things that were out of the ordinary as well, such as hearing sounds far away as if they were near. She noticed her abnormal strength when she flipped the heart monitor at the hospital and the owner of the restaurant who confronted her earlier today. She had lifted him off the ground as if he was nothing and had enough strength to choke the air out of his lungs, and now she had picked up a very hot piece, not feeling the sensation. She wasn't always like this. Something had happened to her, and it scared her to think about what it could be. He grabbed her hand and stared at it to check the scar the hotness had left on her hand, but he found nothing, and he stared at her with suspicious eyes. "You don't have any burnt marks on your skin? How's that possible?" "It wasn't that hot." She laughed to cover up the suddenly quiet room. "Oh, okay." He let her go, and she quickly ate through the rest meat on the plate as if it was nothing. "And you can't remember much?" Daniel asked, handing her a glass of water when she finished eating. She took it and gulped it quickly before handing it back to him. "A few things, but my brain is all over the place, trying to recover what it can." "Oh, okay, I'm all ears." She took an hour telling him everything she could remember since waking up at the hospital. The only details she left out were her conflict with the man at the restaurant and her unexplainable strength and sense of hearing. "A few come back every hour." He nodded in agreement. "In no time, they will come back," he assured her and picked the plate to the kitchen. She rose, and this time she followed him. "Did I leave you for Aaron?" She had many memories of Daniel, and some of them were of them as a couple, which meant they had once dated. But judging by the way Daniel reacted and treated her, she knew they were barely friends now, and she wanted to know the cause of it. She had heard Aaron's voice at the hospital after waking up and putting everything together so far. It only meant he was back in her life somehow, and if that was true, it meant he must have served as the reason for their breakup. He chuckled, a way to make the pain feel less. He quickly rinsed the plate, set it on the plate rack, and returned to the living room. "You left for yourself and Zion." She followed him. "Zion?" she repeated, staring at him, clueless about who or what he spoke about. He gave her a pitiful look, and she wondered why. In none of her narration of the scattered memory she had, did she mention Zion? Zion was something important, something she wasn't supposed to forget that quick, but as she scanned her head, nothing came up and she stared at him with eyes pleading for clarification. "Zion is your son with Aaron," Daniel answered, and still it didn't ring a bell. Why didn't she have any memory of him? How could she have lost a memory as important as having a son? Again, she tried to scramble through her brain and find out all those memories, but they came out short. "I had a son," she said quietly and sat on the couch. "Yes, you do, but you don't remember." She shook her head, her voice coming up low. "No, I don't remember." He sighed. "Okay, I will tell you everything I know, and I promise I will be honest." She nodded and sat quietly, waiting to listen. And he took the seat next to her and narrated everything he could remember since he had known her for the last few years. "We broke up almost a year ago, and though I couldn't bear the thought of you not being a part of my life, I had to move on." Zera felt horrible for who she was. "I am sorry for hurting you the way I did." He stepped away from her and walked over to the box she had kept on the table earlier, opened it, and then pulled out an automatic rifle. "Don't be. At least you stuck around and tried to be a good friend, even though I wasn't having it. I was already moving on with someone else, Nicole, and when you told me and tried to warn me about her, I told you to stay off. I should have listened. I was nothing but a means to her, and by the time I realized it, she had already killed my mother and left me for dead." He answered with a pained voice. She gasped and a tear ran down her face. There was so much happening and so much she was learning, and she wanted to pause and breathe. "Daniel, you didn't deserve what you went through, what we put you through." He picked a small black box from inside the box on the table and set it on the table. He flipped it open, and in it were 24 of silver bullets. He adjusted the rifle in his hand and slid the bullets into it after opening the box. "If I didn't go through what I went through, I would never have realized there were supernatural beings amongst us who derive pleasure from our pain. If I didn't go through the pain, I wouldn't have had what it takes. I wouldn't have been able to harness the pain, grief, and hatred into something powerful. I am not Daniel Spear, the naive, weak lecturer anymore. She rose to her feet, dreading the question she wanted to ask. What are you now? He cocked the rifle and turned to look at me. I am a hunter, hunting supernatural beings and sending them off to their creator. You kill them? She asked, her voice coming off as surprised and afraid. The memories she had of him did not portray him as a cold-hearted killer. The Daniel she could remember was sweet and kind and the nicest guy she ever came across. Was losing his mother justification enough to change him? Yes, because no one of them is good, he answered and set the rifle on the table after loading it. After Nicole attacked me and left me for dead 4 weeks ago, a hunter found me and took me in. He treated me and taught me all I needed to know. He told me the things I saw Nicole do to my mom weren't a dream or my memory, but reality. Then he told me werewolves and supernatural beings existed in our world, and their mission was nothing but destruction. The reason I survived her attack and I didn't become like her was because I had a different blood. He told me I remained human because I had the blood of a hunter, and it flowed through my veins. I already had the gift, I just had to harness it through pain. He promised to train me after I healed, and that's what he did. Now I am just like him. Does it also mean he would kill her if she was a supernatural being without thinking twice? She wasn't saying she was, but some things she had done yesterday were not very natural. She gulped. That's your job as a hunter. He nodded. Yes, and there is no greater service to the human cause than protecting them and making sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else, he said, and she heard the pain as well as the rage in his voice. Zera's lashes fluttered, and she heard grunting sounds coming from outside the bedroom. Daniel had offered her the bedroom for her comfort last night. He told her he will stay in the living room, and when she insisted, he told her the couch was comfortable and that he had laid in there most days. She gave in and accepted his offer of the bedroom, and after bathing and changing into the clothes he brought, she went to bed. Sleep didn't come. Her mind had no rest. She wanted to remember everything, but the more she tried, the harder it became. Daniel told her everything he knew about her job, her son, her relationship with Aaron, and her family, and they created a sort of image in her mind, but not an actual memory of them. She felt as if those memories were locked in a room, and she needed a key to open it. It wasn't far away, she knew it, but needed a key, perhaps a click in her mind that would send them all coming back. Also, judging from what Daniel told her about herself, she was very much human. At least until the last time he saw her. She thought about the accident, what could have caused it, and, most importantly, why she had energy as if she wasn't involved in one yesterday. The doctor had spoken about the mysterious disappearance of her wounds, and also the presence of her strength. She knew the only ones with the answers were the ones she ran from at the hospital, and she couldn't trust them. The grunting noise coming from outside wasn't loud, but she had somehow heard it from her subconscious and woken up to the sound. She made her way out of the bedroom, into the living room, but found no trace of Daniel there. Then she opened the front door and stepped out, and there Daniel was, far away, naked from the waist up and sword training in the cold. Her heart went out to him, and she feared what being exposed to this weather could do to him, but she stayed silent. He trained as if he had done this over 1,000 times, and she told herself she did not need to worry about him. She sat outside before the door and watched him train with all his might, moving swiftly with the blade in his hand. It was impressive to watch, and never in a million years would she have seen this side of Daniel coming. But here he was, a man of fast speed, endurance, and stamina. A part of her wanted to learn how to fight and how to be in control. She felt like she needed it, but another part knew that would be the death of her. She didn't possess the strength Daniel did, nor the zeal. She would die if she pushed herself this far. She would stick to running, because whatever happened in the last few years of her life, which she couldn't remember, had given strength to her legs to run for miles and at a quick pace without getting tired. What had happened to Daniel had pushed him into this level of endearing training and perfection, but such hadn't happened to her yet. Maybe it had, and she couldn't remember. Daniel returned the blade to its scabbard and made his way toward the house. Zera rose to her feet as she watched him draw closer. "Daniel, good morning," she stuttered, her eyes staying focused on his face and not the other parts of his naked upper body. He must have seen her dilemma as he got close because he raised a brow. "Zera, good morning. Why are you up so early?" "You woke me up," she mumbled, maintaining eye contact with him so she wouldn't sway her gaze. "I'm sorry about that." He gave her an apologetic look. "Why are you out here in the cold practicing? Isn't it harmful or something?" "It is if you're not used to it. After 3 weeks of doing something constantly, it becomes a part of you. So it's perfectly fine." Zera didn't believe him, but he seemed to believe what he said and she had to let it go. "Okay, as long as you're safe." He smiled and his warm brown eyes softened on hers. "I am." He patted her shoulder before walking in. "What do you want for breakfast?" She opened her mouth to say meat, but she snapped it shut. She couldn't request meat again, even though that's what she really wanted. That would make him suspicious of her. And that was the last thing she wanted. He was the only one she could trust, the only one whose memory lingered in her brain even after everything, and she couldn't afford to have him think something was wrong with her. "I'll have whatever you are having," she answered, and they stepped into the house together. It was an hour later, and they were both bathed and in the kitchen while Daniel made egg sauce and potato. Zera sat at the counter, watching. He had put on his shirt, which was a good thing because she noticed one thing she lacked now was control, and it took little things for her to snap and lose focus. "Was he a good person?" she asked out of the blue, and Daniel stared at her with a narrowed brow. "Who?" he asked, pouring the egg into the pan. "Aaron," she said, clarifying her statement. She knew it was an odd question to ask since he was her ex, and Aaron was her current boyfriend, but Daniel was the closest she had to a mirror with honesty. "I know this is difficult to answer, but I really need to know." He pressed his lips and thought about it for a minute. "Yes, to the best of my knowledge," he answered, stirring the pan for a bit before covering it up and turning to face her. "I mean, I hated him, probably more than life, and still consider him a bastard. He got to have you and you were the girl of my dreams, so I hated him for that. But I still cannot deny how much he loves you. I saw you two together a few times, and he had nothing but adoration for you. He's also a good father to Zion." "How do you know that?" he shrugged. "You wouldn't be with a man that didn't love Zion as he deserves." "Yeah, Zion, her son." He had a point. Aaron wasn't a bad person, and he indeed sounded like a sweet person. "I can't trust him," she revealed, placing her jaw in her palms, supported up by her elbows on the counter. "His very thoughts scream not trustworthy in my brain, despite my empty memory. Maybe you two had issues before the accident, and somewhere deep inside you know you're yet to resolve it? But you were happy with him. I know he would lay his life on the line for you without thinking twice about it." "Thank you for your honesty, Daniel." To an extent, she wished she could be this honest with him about everything, but she feared what that would mean. "I wish I would just remember." He turned the cooker off and stepped towards the center counter where she sat. "It's all right. You will remember. Everything is possible if you put your mind to it," he told her. She wanted to remember things, and she had put her mind to it before falling asleep last night, but the saying had not worked for her yet. She still had a huge blank in her brain, and how she had memories of Daniel was still a mystery to her. "I want to believe that's true," she told him, sighing heavily. He said little after that before serving breakfast. They ate in silence, and when she finished, she spoke. "Thank you for breakfast and kind words. What are your plans for today?" "Following the trail I have had since the past week," he answered and rose to his feet, picking up their plates and taking them into the kitchen. "What trail?" Pain flashed in his eyes. "Of the one responsible for the death of my mother. I think it's about time I settled that score." The one responsible for the death of his mother was a werewolf, and she had also attacked and left him for dead. "Killing her will not bring my mother back, but I would be happy to know a threat to the world has been taken care of. That's my job. If she's as deadly as you say, do you think you can take her alone?" Zera asked. I have to keep the faith that I can. So, where did the trail say she would be? At the South Park by 3 p.m. This is the only opening I've had in days, and I have to take and use it. He reached for the towel beside the sink and wiped his hands with it after finishing. And when she's dead, what next? He probably had no thought that far, and now that he didn't have the answer to the question. I guess I will return to my job of lecturing at Stanford University by day and hunting at night. Daniel helped set the TV up since Zera would stay here while he was away, and when he was about to leave, he informed her food was in the fridge and told her to make herself at home. At 11 a.m., Daniel left the house and Zera, seeing the opportunity, searched the freezer in search of meat. It was what her body wanted, but she found none there. Daniel must have cooked all he had yesterday. She still needed meat, and the craving grew to the peak that she couldn't control anymore, and she had to leave the house. She picked Daniel's jacket from the hanger and shrugged it on before leaving the house. She wandered into the woods, not knowing where her legs took her, but not being able to stop it either way. She came to a stop and looked around, seeing nothing but grass and trees in the woods and wondering why she was there. Just then, she heard the sound from not so far away. She hurried in that direction. She stooped and found a white rabbit beside a tree on her right side, and the urge to feast on it took over her. In a second, she darted to it and caught it in her grasp. She tore at it, eating as if she was a food-starved beast. The hunger disappeared after she got her fill, and her senses returned. She stared at her hands covered in blood, and she shook in fear and disgust. She threw up before she could stop herself, tears running down her face at what was happening to her. Why did she find delight in harming and killing this poor creature? Why did she find satisfaction? What sort of monster was she becoming? She wiped her hands on the grass before her and rose to her feet, running from the spot and toward the house. She arrived in no time and made her way into the house and the bathroom. Daniel was still off fighting Nicole, and she was glad because he wouldn't get to see her like this. She washed off the rest, bloodstains on her hands, and in the bathroom basin, and stared at herself in the mirror. She saw her mouth covered with blood like a monster in a horror story. Tears ran down her face and she sobbed for a while, then washed her mouth over and over to get the stain and the stench off her. She stared back at herself in the mirror. She looked neater than a few seconds ago, but she didn't feel any better. She could still smell the blood, and she tore at the t-shirt she had on and tossed it onto the floor, leaving her naked from the waist up. She took off her trouser and walked into the shower. The water descended on her skin after she turns it on. She took the bar soap, rubbing it all over her body before washing it off. The dirt lingering on her skin came off and the smell reduced. Then she returned to stare at herself in the mirror before the basin. She looked better and neater, and the stench had also reduced. This was good news. Just then, her eyes caught sight of the marking on the space between her neck and shoulder, and her eyes narrowed. Her hand lifted to trail the mark that looked like the shape of fangs, slowly, wondering how they got there. She hadn't noticed the mark since waking up, and now that she had, she couldn't unsee it. She had noticed the healed fang mark on her right hand immediately after she woke, and though she wondered what it was, she hadn't found an answer yet. This, however, was something else. It looked as if she had been bitten with the intention of leaving a mark, but why? What was the aim? What could have left such a mark? Whatever did, this wasn't human. Her breath hitched in her throat at the many thoughts running through her head, and as she stared at herself, she saw her eyes transform from their blue orbs into a silver color that she had never seen before. She stumbled back, hitting the wall, and just then she felt the snap. What she had seen was the key to unlocking her memories, and they came rushing back like a flood. She remembered everything and everyone's, every heartbreak and sad memory, the good times and times she had regrets for. She remembered the funeral and Nicole being there. She remembered Nicole telling her the truth and Aaron confirming it. She remembered the road and the crash. She remembered hearing Aaron's voice before blacking into nothingness. It was a terrible crash, and she shouldn't have survived it. But she had, which meant something far from natural had happened. She had experienced the strength and speed of a supernatural being since waking and her increased sense of smell and craving. She had read all these while doing research in the past, and these traits only meant one thing. She was a werewolf. Her banged at the truth, and she held on to it as the pain increased, and she wanted it to stop more than anything. Her hands grew bigger and veiny, and her claws grew out. She groaned in pain and dropped to her knees, and as the pain grew beyond her control, she screamed out. "Zera!" She heard Daniel's panicked voice call from not far away. He heard her scream and already knew something was wrong. She panicked, knowing he would find her in this form if he came into the room and would kill her immediately. She wanted him to stay out or at least change back to her normal form. But that was impossible, not with her memories and the truth coming into play. The door flung open, and in came Daniel. "Zera, are you all right?" He raced over to the floor where she was and tilted her face only to see it glow, making him gasp aloud. He fell back and rose to his feet, his eyes filled with surprise. "You're one of them." He gasped. "You're one of them." Her hands fell from her face and a fearful look registered in her eyes as she expected nothing but the worst now. "Daniel," she called out in a hollow voice as he scrambled to his feet. He dashed out of the room the same second with lightning speed, and she knew she had to follow him. Her head hurt, and it grew with every second that passed, but she couldn't stay still and let it subside. She had to follow and make him understand things weren't what he thought. She ran into the living room and found Daniel already reaching for his rifle. He takes it and pointed it at her. "Do not move." She held her hands up despite wanting to put them on her aching head. "Daniel, listen to me." "How long have you been like this?" he demanded, and she couldn't answer. Her silence gave him the answer. "You were one of them all along, the kind that killed my mother." He cocked the rifle. "Tell me why I shouldn't end your life right now." "Because you know me." "Do I, he demanded. "You've been hiding your true form ever since you got here with the hope of fooling and attacking me when I least expect it." "That's not true," she protested and took a step forward. "Silence and stay back." His finger grabbed hold of the trigger, and she feared he would pull it and end her life here and now. "I think I will have that, thank you." Aaron's voice came out of nowhere, and the next second he took the rifle from Daniel's hand before stepping away from him. Zera's gaze moved to Aaron, and her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know if Daniel would have spared her life, and Aaron stepped in right in time to save her. Daniel spun around, his reflexes kicking in, and he reached for the dagger on the table, picked it, and swung at Aaron. His speed took Aaron off guard, and the dagger cut him through at the side of his rib. His skin burnt at the contact of the silver blade, and his eyes glowed red as he glared at Daniel murderously. "Keep doing that, and I might end up killing you," he growled at him, his hand moving to his side. Unlike the shake Daniel experienced when he saw Zara's eyes glow, seeing Aaron's eye didn't take him into shock mode. "You're also a werewolf. I should have known. You turned Zera into a monster like yourself. Your kind shouldn't be allowed to live," he yelled. He didn't take the warning and immediately launch into attack mode. He swung and slashed with a great speed almost as fast as Aaron's reflexes. Daniel aimed his dagger at Aaron's shoulder, but he pushed him off and hit the object out of his hand. "Enough!" Aaron thundered, tired of fighting him. The longer they fought, the more the need to kill made itself known in his eyes. Daniel's hands balled into a fist. "This is my house. I make the rules, and only I say when it's enough." He threw his fist, and Aaron caught it without sweat, but he threw the other in a flash, and it took Aaron off guard. The impact took Aaron back a few steps, and blood trickled down his nose. "Now I'm going to kill you," he roared and launched forward, and his hands balled into a fist. His fist collided with Daniel's shoulder, sending him down immediately. "Stay down," he warned, but Daniel, proving to be stubborn, got back to his feet. He ran over to the other side of the room and unhung the bottle on the wall. He opened it in a second and swung the liquid towards Aaron. The smell registered in Aaron's head, and he stepped back, but not fast enough because some of the content poured on his skin and it burnt him. Wolfsbane. Aaron barely recovered when Daniel pulled out a pocket knife, and Aaron knew it was silver. His entire house was built and designed with weapons against werewolves and supernatural creatures. Aaron dashed over to him, hit the penknife out of his hands, and grabbed him by his shirt. He had had a few contacts with Daniel in the past, but he could swear there was something so much different in him now. "Who are you?" "He's a hunter," Ivan answered, and they both turned to him. "He hunts and kills our kind and even those that aren't." He elaborates, turning his gaze to Zera, who hadn't made a move since this fight started a minute ago. She had been too worn to make a move. Aaron shoved him off and stepped back to stand in front of Zera. "You're not killing anyone today." "And who's going to stop me?" Daniel shouted, taking a step forward. Ivan's hand lifted and his eyes became completely "YM," he said, and held him in his position. Daniel struggled to move but failed to. "What did you do to me?" He yelled out in frustration after moments of fruitless struggles. "I placed a spell on you. It should keep you still until we are done here. As you can tell, we didn't come for you." Ivan answered before turning to Aaron, whose attention now rested on Zera. He didn't take a step towards her. He just watched her. "How did you find me?" she asked, but Aaron didn't answer. "Aren't you going to say anything?" "You had shut your mind and Ivan couldn't reach you. So he had to search the minds of others, hoping to find you, and he did when he followed Daniel." Aaron said, and took a step forward. "You turned me into a werewolf," she said in a voice mixed with confusion and sadness. "I had no other choice. We were all going to lose you, and I had to do what I thought was necessary. I know you don't trust me, but if you come with us, I promise I will tell you nothing but the truth," he vowed and stretched his hand out to her. She didn't take his hand. Instead, she stepped towards Daniel, who still stood restrained on his stand. He might be angry and filled with the intent to kill, but she had lived with him for a day and she knew his story. She knew underneath that rage was the pain of loss, and she understood it because she felt it when she lost Tia. Daniel wasn't the villain in this story. He was a victim just like them all, and they should not fight each other. They had a common enemy. "Let him go," she told Ivan, but he gave her a look that said that wasn't wise. "Let him go," she told him regardless. Ivan stretched his hand forward, and the invincible barrier around Daniel broke. He stepped forward, but unlike before, he didn't move to attack. "You deserve to know this. I lost control in the room because I regained my memory. I remember everything, just the way you told them to me. I wish things had happened differently, and I wish we can carry on the friendship we once had, but I don't think that would happen. You need to know that I am sorry for everything that happened to you. I am not your enemy, and I'm always going to be here if you need anything." She finished and turned to Aaron. She might have had a lot of reasons to rebel and not trust him after everything, but she knew the only place to get the answer was where it all began. There was no more running from reality. She was going to face it head-on and hopefully win this time. She stretched her hand to him, and he took it and tightened his hand around hers, taking in a deep breath. They got to the door, and she paused when he spoke. "Is Zion also supernatural?" he asked. She paused and turned to Daniel. "Yes, he is, and he is nothing like the one who killed your mother. We aren't like them," she said the last part in conviction. Daniel didn't believe what she said. His eyes told her, but he stayed silent. "And Nicole, did you find her like you hoped?" "No, I wasn't successful. I'll keep trying," he answered. "Do take care of yourself and stay safe, dear friend. This will not be the last time we'll meet." "The answer is 30, Zion answered the home tutor who currently taught him maths. "Very good," she beamed at him. His gaze drifted to the door, and they met Zera's. His eyes grew wide in disbelief, and he ran off his feet and towards her, abandoning the lesson. "Mommy," he called out in excitement and joy, his hands spread out for a hug. Zera dropped to her knee and scooped him into her arms. Holding him in her arms was a thing of joy, and the warmth was unlike none other. "Baby, I missed you, Mommy," he said, patting her shoulders with his little hands. It had taken over 3 hours to get back home, and all the way home, the drive was done in silence. None of the three in the car wanted to break the silence. Zera would have preferred to get down and run all the way home, but after the event of the day, she just wanted this peace. She didn't place her mind on any of that, but on the very thought of seeing Zion. It warmed her heart and made it beat steadily. She had wanted his arms around her, and now that she had it, her joy was complete. "I missed you too, my boy." She kissed his hair and pulled back to cup his face in her hand. "Hope you've been good?" He bobbed his head. "Yes, Daddy said he would bring you home, and he did." He beamed at her. She hugged him again, grateful that she got the chance to do this. She stepped out of the room to let Zion finish his lesson and made her way into the bedroom. It didn't surprise her to find Aaron there. It was his room, after all. They had said little to each other since they left Daniel's place, and she had stayed silent because she didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to say to the man who took the life of her father and kept her in the dark about it. He was also the man that saved her life countless times. Daniel was right. He'd lay his life on the line for her without even thinking about it. That was how selfless he was with her. She stepped up towards him and threw her hands around Aaron, setting aside her anger for a second and clinging to the man who still had her heart. For a moment during the accident, she didn't think she would ever see him again, and it broke her heart, but he was here. He tightened his hold around her, dragging a deep breath and burying his face in the crook of her neck. From her calculations, it had been a few days since they last saw each other, but it felt as if it was a decade, and the longing was real. They stayed there for a while, neither of them wanting to let the other go, but Zera found strength and pulled away from the loving hug. She cleared her throat and lowered herself to the bed. "Thank you for coming for me. I'd like to be optimistic, but there's no certainty what would have happened if you two didn't show up when you did." He shook his head. "It's the very least we could do. I am responsible for everything that has happened so far, so I owe it to you." She glanced up at him. "I need answers. I need the truth." He did not argue. "Yes, and that's what you will get. I know I asked this before, but I need to ask again. Did you kill my father?" "Yes, I did." He took a step towards her, and her heart picked up a beat. "And I would rather show what happened to you. That's if you want me to." He stepped towards her. "How do I know you won't utter it to appear the way you want it to be?" "Because it's my memory. I have no power to change it," he replied and placed his hands on her temple. The next second, she stood on a dark, lonely road, but Aaron wasn't beside her. The cold night breeze blew over her skin, making goosebumps break out all over. The trees around swayed, and the dry leaves rustled around. Its soft, muffled crackling sound echoed because of how quiet the road was. The road looked familiar, and she knew she had been on it before. She heard an argument taking place behind her and turned around. There she found 4 boys who looked to be in their early 20s standing around the road, and they looked to be waiting for someone. 2, including the one that looks like the younger version of Aaron, had black hair. The 3rd had short red hair, and the 4th had blonde hair. They all stood tall and oozed youthful strength and foolishness. "What are you going to do if you see him?" the boy with red hair and a mischievous smile on his face asked, and he held a bottle to his mouth. "We are going to talk," the younger Aaron answered. "Talk?" he scoffed. "Werewolves aren't feared and reverenced because of their ability to talk. They are feared because of the terror they inflict with their glowing eyes, sharp claws, and terrifying fangs." He answered, and the 2 others with him bobbed their heads in agreement with what he said. "This man killed 3 of our own. One of those he killed was my brother, and we should make him pay," he growled, and the menace in his voice could be heard. He was probably fed up with the silence Aaron gave him as a response. Aaron held his hand on, "Listen, I know you're grieved by the loss, but there is no guarantee he killed the 3 pack members, Tosin." Aaron answered, "That would mean he flew from the States to the UK just to kill our kind. Humans aren't that powerful, and hunters aren't that reckless." "My intuition never failed before," the blonde one spoke in defense. "Even so, you're not a wise one, Seth, so I cannot believe everything you say, so we will talk," Aaron said to the other black-haired fellow, and his voice told them there was no more negotiating. "I am your alpha, and you will do what I tell you, and I say stand down and let me handle it. He's coming," the one with black hair announced, and they stopped quarreling and took their position on the side road, while Aaron stood in the center. A red Toyota Corolla, which Zera knew belonged to her father, drove closer towards them. Despite the speed of the incoming car, Aaron didn't move. He stood and waited. The car drove closer, and it didn't look ready to stop. Aaron's hand shut forward, a way of telling him to stop. At his gesture, he slowed down the car. A smile almost crossed Aaron's face, but it disappeared when he heard Tosin's voice from behind. "Fuck this! Fuck talking!" He cussed and charged towards the oncoming car, which was now a few feet away. "No, Tosin, stop!" He tried stepping in to stop Tosin, who had acted against his command to stand down, but Seth and the blonde-haired boys urged forward to hold him down, while Tosin rammed into the car with a force that sent it tumbling off the road. Aaron watched with wide eyes as horror played before his eyes. "What did you just do?" "I did what was necessary. As of this minute, you're no longer our alpha," Tosin said, and they released their hold on Aaron. Aaron withdrew his hand from her temple, and she drew a sharp breath and stared at him in disbelief. Her eyes grew glassy and she couldn't stop the tears. "You said you killed him." He nodded. "I did. What Tosin and the rest did was on me. I was the alpha. I led them there." "Aaron," she started, rising to her feet, but he wasn't done speaking. "I couldn't place my attention on the members of my pack who betrayed me. Instead, I ran off the road to the victim, whose car Tosin had thrown off." His eyes grew remorseful. He pressed his lips together and turned away from her. "I could do nothing. He died on impact." She made her way around to stand before him. "What I saw were 3 men that disobeyed their alpha's command and took the laws into their hands. That has nothing on you. I've lived with the guilt and the troubles since then. I lost Tosin, Seth, and Derek, and never saw them again. Not until a few months ago when I received information that they had gone to become a part of the rebellion pack. Was my father a hunter? Or was he a victim in the wrong place at the wrong time? Your father was a hunter, but he wasn't responsible for the death of the 3 members of my pack. Tosin had killed the members of my pack, intending to put the blame on Levi, so I would take his life as payment. When they saw I had a different plan, they took matters into their own hands. I later learnt Levi was a hunter and hunted around the states and was a thorn in the flesh of the rebellion pack, and they needed it removed. Tosin's act granted him, Seth and Derek, free passage into the rebellion pack where they are till this day. Her father never told her he was a hunter, and she believed he never told Betty either. But having lived with Daniel and seen his life, she understood why he would have hidden what he did from his family. He wanted to keep them safe, even though they had had little safety since then. There was so much she didn't know. So much she had to learn. "You should have told me the truth." "I never knew the man that died because of my negligence was your father, Zera. All these truths I discovered after Tia's death and waited for the right time to tell you. But it never came. I should never have left you in the dark about my past." Nicole knew the truth about that night because Tosin told her, and she twisted the story to paint me as the villain. She succeeded. "I am sorry." A tear ran down her face. "I jumped to conclusions about everything, and I should have trusted you more. I'm sorry. You had every right to judge me. I don't." She took a step towards him. "I will do better." Her heart picked up a beat for him. "I need you to promise me that when the time comes, you will point out Tosin and let me handle the rest." "I will do that." He gave her a firm nod. "Good, I missed you." He pressed his lips together, his emotions coming into display. "I've missed you, too." "How much?" He groaned and his lashes fluttered. "Very much. I thought I wouldn't get the chance to talk to you or even hear your voice again." He took a step forward, closing up the space between them, and his arms wrapped around her waist. "I thought I'd never get to hold you like this anymore. Or kiss you." He leaned in and his lips brushed over hers. She sighed in contentment. "When I lost control of the car, I thought I'd never get to see your face again. You would always have me. I swear to you, Zera." "You swear?" "I swear." He took her lips between his. End of Part 6. Part 7. 12 hours ago. "I found her," Ivan said, pushing open the bedroom door, and he found him sitting on the bed and holding on to Zion, who currently sat on his lap reading a storybook. Aaron's eyes lit up at his words, and he set his son down on his feet. Zion wasted no time before darting out of the room, and it seemed he had wanted to do that for so long. As soon as the door room shut, Aaron turned his attention fully to Ivan. Ivan gave him a pitiful look, but Aaron shrugged it off, telling him he was fine. He looked horrible, and it had been hell these past few days. He barely found sleep, and when he did, it had been nightmares of Zera's accidents that woke him up. He felt helpless, and he couldn't control it, and every hour he prayed for positive news from Ivan while trying to be the best father for Zion. "Where is she?" "Granville Center at the south of the state," he answered, and it took Aaron back a little. "That's almost out of the state. What do you think she would be looking for there?" "She's with Daniel," he replied, and Aaron's face paled up at his words. "Daniel?" he echoed in confusion. "I think she remembers him somehow, and I think that's where she has been since she left the hospital." Aaron wondered why Daniel, of all people, was the only one she remembered, but he was happy she was with him. Happy because if she had been with him since she left the hospital, then she hadn't had the time to mingle with others or had a reason to kill anyone. It meant her powers hadn't overridden her, and she was still in control. He also wondered if he had discovered what she was or if he was still in the dark about it. He wondered what his reaction would be when he did. He was human the last time he checked and might have little knowledge of who or what Zera now was. Daniel wasn't a bad guy from what he knew about him. He just didn't like him because Zera had a soft spot for him. "Why Daniel?" he mumbled, more to himself than to Ivan. His brother, who heard, answered, "I don't know, but I can't get into her head anymore, and so I can't see anything. We need to find her now." He reached into the wardrobe and picked up his long black coat from the hanger. He shrugged it on and turned to Ivan. "Yes, we do, but we also need to inform the others." Lionel and Ceci were both passionately kissing while standing on the balcony of the house. "From what I heard, Ivan is closing in on finding Zera," she told him, and heard his heart pick up in its beat. She had seen him miserable since Zera ran away from the hospital, and the only way to take his mind from overthinking was by seducing him. She had to make herself the center of his attention, and that distraction had worked so far. This news had also helped lighten his mood, and knowing it wasn't false hope made her happy. "You mean it?" he breathed against her mouth. She nodded, smiling, and she leaned in to take his lips between hers. "Soon we will have her back." Her hand glided down into his trouser to play with him slowly when their lips met, earning a thick moan from his mouth. "You do know the bedroom was created for this sole purpose, right?" Damore asked, making his presence known from not so far away. Without turning to her brother, who just interrupted, "Or you can ignore it and walk away," she said. Damore didn't seem to care that he had invaded their privacy because he spoke. "Why should I be the one to ignore when you're the one overstepping boundaries?" he argued. Ceci sighed and pulled her hand out of Lionel's trousers before turning to Damore with her arms folded over her chest. "What do you want?" "From you, nothing. Aaron wants to have a word with us, which is the only reason I'm here," he said and walked away mumbling, "And I'm the annoying one." Ceci turned with an apology to Lionel, and he nodded in understanding. "It's okay. Go, I will wait." He leaned in and kissed her lips, and she kissed back before pulling away. "Next time, it will be in the bedroom and with the doors shut," she promised. "Okay." Ceci was the last to step into the study, and Aaron didn't look too pleased about that. "Where were you?" She stayed quiet. "Why don't you answer, Ceci?" Damore asked, and she cast him a hard glare before turning to face Aaron. "I was with Lionel." The displeasure in his eyes reduced, and an understanding look sets in. "How is he?" "Getting better, thank you. Damore called for me. He said you wanted to talk." Aaron bobbed his head. "Yes, we finally located Zera. Ivan informed me earlier, and I wanted to pass the news on to you two. We will set out to bring her home. Damore will be in charge of the pack. He will lead and tend to them until our return, and you will be in charge of Zion and the household. Is that understood?" "Yes, but don't you think Lionel should be here in this meeting as well? She's his little sister, after all." He shook his head. "You can deliver the message to him. There's no reason to involve him." Ivan and Aaron departed, taking the Ford car at Ivan's instruction. Aaron didn't see the need for them to take a car. They could race there faster, but Ivan told him this was the way, and he had to give in. He had no other choice. The most important thing for him right now was to find Zera. 2 days without her felt like 20 years. and he couldn't wait to see her again. In her absence, he had kept his mind occupied by reading up all he knew about sages. This was his way of not being left wanting when he finally met her. They were supernatural beings just like them, but with abilities and strength than any supernatural being has ever known. They were human and could blend and live amongst humans without being detected because the full moon did not affect them. There were rarely ever sages, and there had been no record of one in the last 100 years. It took 4 hours to get to the south, and Aaron surprised himself with the level of patience he possessed throughout the drive. He would get to see Zera in the end, so it was worth it to him. "Is this the place?" he asked as Ivan packed the car by the side of the road, which had no house or station close by. "No, it's not, but I think it's best we use our legs from here on." He opened the door and stepped out, and without asking a question, Aaron did the same. Ivan took a left turn after about 10 minutes of walking, and not long after there stood a cottage before them. Aaron's heartbeat flares as he picked the scent that belonged to none other than Zera. His whole being came to life, knowing he would get to see her. Now. The bedroom door opened, and Aaron and Zera pulled away from the kiss and turned around to find the emotional Lionel in the bedroom. Zera rose to her feet and stepped forward, and there was a look of guilt on her face as she approached her brother. Aaron understood why he was emotional. He had lost Tia, and not long after, almost lost her too. Even in his misery these past few days, he felt pity for Lionel. He smiled cheerfully. "Hey, sis." Tears ran down her face. "Lionel," she called out and threw her arms around him. He tightened his arms around her, and they stayed that way for another minute before pulling away. "I am sorry I ran away from the hospital." She hiccups. "I never meant to make things difficult. I couldn't remember anything. I'm sorry if I scared you." He smiled at her. "It's fine, I understand. You were afraid and confused. It happens to the best of us. I am glad you're here now." He pulled her into a comforting hug. Everything was falling into place, and Aaron loved the feeling it brought. "Make love to me," was the last word Zera offered after stepping back into the room and closing the door behind her. Her eyes glowed, and the lust she felt for him flared in her eyes. He had no choice but to obey. He watched her sleep. It was a sight he couldn't pass off. This was not a dream. This was the reality. She was alive and with him, the woman he loved. There was still so much more to discover, but he knew it would only get better. In the past hour, he had shown her just how much he missed her and reminded her just who she belonged to. Each kiss, each touch, every caress. Perfection. He would never tire of her. Not now, not ever. She twirled in bed, and a few seconds later she sat down abruptly, and his arm around her dropped. He sighed in discontentment, and he sat up as well, not liking the sudden change. "Already changed your mind?" he asked, and the uncertainty in his voice came forth. "I'm never leaving again, Aaron, unless you ask me to. Never." He leaned in and kissed her shoulder. She shivered at his kiss, but didn't pull away. He kissed further up her shoulders to her neck when his mark was. She must have sensed the thought that almost crossed his mind because she asked, "I am no longer human, am I?" He nodded. "You're not. We were out of time, and we weren't ready to let you go yet. I wasn't ready to let you go." "Will the ritual work now that I am a werewolf?" He stayed quiet, and she turned to stare at him with a narrowed gaze. "You're not a werewolf, Zera." Her eyes narrowed on his, trying to find the humor, but she saw none. "What am I?" "You're a sage." "A sage? What is a sage?" "A sage is a supernatural being with an outrageous amount of power and control. Though created by werewolves, they are stronger than most. While some call them a mistake, I do not believe the moon goddess makes mistakes." "How are you a werewolf and me a sage when you turned me?" she asked, her eyes curious as she stared at him. Aaron took the time to explain everything to her to the best of his knowledge. "Werewolves were forbidden from turning anyone, and I never knew why until I turned you. There's no other explanation, but you're not a werewolf, neither are you human." "I'm the odd one, then." "Some things happen and are beyond our control," he answered. The Hart siblings were birthed by 2 werewolves, but while 3 of the children were werewolves, Ivan turned out to be a witch. He had magic as his supernatural ability, hence he was the wise one in the pack. He was born into a family of werewolves, and so he should have been one by natural order. It was said that Damor, his twin brother, had taken everything that would have made him a werewolf and left him with nothing but magic in the womb. When many of his mates experienced their first shift, Ivan didn't. He became the odd one and hated it. However, he was now one of the strongest beings in the pack, with abilities to pierce through supernatural veils and see into dimensions. Does that mean I'm some sort of monster? He shook his head. She was far from a monster. No, but just like wolfsbane is dangerous to werewolves, so are you. That means I'm a danger even to you. Yes, but I trust you, and so I'm not afraid. And the ritual? He had no answer for that. He hadn't thought about that since she woke up, and now that she asked, he couldn't answer. Zera returned from putting Zion to bed like she had promised to, and found Aaron seated quietly in bed facing the other side, and deep in thought. She didn't step away from the door, and neither did she make him know she was watching him. She stayed that way for a while. The happening had left him so lost in thought he didn't even notice her presence. After a few minutes passed in silence, she stepped further into the room. "What are you thinking about?" He snapped out of his thought and turned to look at her, his eyes flickering. "You're here." "For a while now," she answered before asking again, "What are you thinking about?" "The last crimson moon is a week away, hun," he told her, stretching his hand out to her, and she moved into it. They had first thought the accident and being a sage would ruin the ritual, but Ivan had embarked on a search for answers. He found out it didn't ruin the ritual and instead reduced the amount of risk that would be involved for her. It seemed fate had played its card this time in their favor. The crimson moon, which was 6 weeks away from the lunar eclipse, drew closer and everything was in place. At least that's what she thought until last week, and though they navigated through it, it got harder with the passing day. "I don't know how to feel, and I just received words that more than half of the pack members have deserted the pack estate in the last week." It was getting worse than expected, she thought to herself. They believe safety isn't close, and I can't blame them. Theo had proved that they weren't safe in their territory, and they had decided to seek safety elsewhere. Nowhere is safe, though. Despite Zera being back, her presence was kept a secret from everyone who wasn't her family. Even Dia had heard nothing from her in weeks, but somehow Alpha Theo found out. He began issuing death threats to the Dominio pack, as well as terrorizing other members of the pack at their place of work and school. Last week, they received news that about 3 other packs had joined forces with the Alpha Theo to take out the Dominio pack. The rebellion pack increased with every passing day while they decreased. He rose to his feet, holding her hands in his. "I didn't think you will need it, but you have to train. We have a week, and it should be enough with practice and dedication. You said I have no weaknesses." She reminded him of the same words he used a week ago when he told her who she was. He released her hands and placed his hands on her shoulders. "None that we know of, but the rebellion pack would stop at nothing to destroy this ritual, and they will come for you. I will protect you with everything I have, but you need to be strong." He looked terrified, but not for himself. "Fine, who will train me then?" "Me," he answered. "No," she refused. His hands dropped from her shoulder. "No? If I need to train and control my power in such a short time, then I need someone who would train me without holding back." His brow furrowed. "Do you have anyone in mind?" "Yes, Daniel." "No," was the single word that left his mouth, and he stepped away from her. She couldn't believe her ears. "No, you suggested I train." "Yes, I said train, not get yourself killed." "That's not what I'm doing," she denied. "Daniel might be a nice guy, but he's also a hunter. His first goal is to kill, and he will if he gets the chance. Then I'll make sure he doesn't get the chance." Ivan, who had kept a close watch on Daniel's activities amongst other things in the last week, pushed the boundaries and teleported Daniel from the south into the pack estate at Zera's request. He, just like Aaron, believed it was madness to make him train Zera, but he couldn't object to it. He told them the remaining pack members would leave when they discover a hunter had been brought into the pack estate, and so Zera told him to tell no one else. Then she asked him to place a barrier around the estate that would not allow Daniel to cross certain territories. Daniel, as expected, was furious when he realized where he was and who had brought him there, and his anger was murderous. "Why am I here?" he shouted, turning around in the open field of the Dominio Pack Estate territory. "You're in the Pack Estate," she said, stepping into the field. He turned to face her. "Do you know what I was doing before I was zapped here?" "You were training, Ivan told me." His anger flared at her response. Has he been watching me? Zera didn't lie or try to deny it. Ivan had told her he had his eyes on Daniel since coming for her a week ago. He told her he wanted to look out for the Dominio Pack, but she figured he might have done that because he cared about him more than he let on. "Yes, he has a soft spot for you and wanted to keep an eye on you. Ivan is caring like that, and that's why he brought you here, so you can train with me." "Why would I want to be here and train with you? And why would you want that?" he demanded, seeing how serious she looked. "Because I need you, and I will be honest with you." "Why me?" "Because you're the only one who will train me without holding back. If you know anything about a werewolf pack, then you would know that it needs members to be even considered a pack. Aaron's pack is losing its member with each passing day, and the lesser we become, the more vulnerable we will be." "Why should I help you?" he demanded. "I was trained to hunt and kill your kind, not help them." "I know that, but helping us brings you one step closer to what you want the most." "Nicole," his teeth clench at her words. "What do you know about Nicole?" "I know she had a hand in Tia's death, and I know she had a hand in the accident that brought me to this point. I also know she has sided with the Rebellion Pack, a sworn enemy of the Dominio Pack. Helping me would mean helping the pack, and that would bring Nicole to you in the end." "Why should I trust you now?" "I would never lie to you. You brought me without my sword and dagger," he told her, still furious. "For all I know, this could be a trap." "They are all here," she answered and moved away to reveal Ivan behind her. He stepped up towards them, holding Daniel's sword and dagger in his hands. At his sight, Daniel's hands balled into a fist and his teeth clenched. "You have no right to touch those." He stormed forward and yanked them out of Ivan's grip. He pulled his sword out of its sheath and pointed it at Ivan, who just stared at him. "You've been watching me?" Ivan glanced at her and Daniel snapped. "You look at me when I'm talking to you. Why have you been watching me? Because just like Zera, you're the last of your kind." "That's not true. Pedro is a hunter," he argued. "Pedro was the hunter who trained him in all he knew. He never told her his name, but from the look on his face, she could tell. He was." Ivan corrected and Daniel's face paled. "Hunters are being hunted and going extinct all over the planet. You're the very last of them. Those who we are up against kill him just like they did your mother and Zera's sister. If you're angry, that's good. Use that anger and train her to control her powers. And when the Rebellion Pack attacks, we will be ready enough to defend ourselves and to put up a fight." "Which do you consider necessary at this moment?" Zera spoke and his eyes flew to her. "Your hunter's code, or getting vengeance for your mother." Ivan spent the first hours educating Zera and Aaron on how the ritual would go, just like he had done the last 2 times, and it was a success in those times. They listened and Aaron always took his advice seriously because he was the wise one and looked out for their best interest. Just like the name of the last ritual showed, it would be a blood ritual under the crimson moon. It would be a unifying ritual to sync their union before the moon goddess. Their palms would be sliced open with a silver blade, and as the blood flows out, they will lock hands with each other, sealing the bond faster and making them one in blood, mind, and soul. This ritual would seal the flow of power in Aaron's body, as he would take power from hers, and she would become the navigator of this ability, strength, and power. Ivan had said being a sage had become an advantage, and he was right. Being outside in the cold, under the crimson moon with her palms sliced open and untreated for many minutes, would have been unbearable for the human Zera. But now she could endure it. It didn't mean it was the safest. The pack lost more than half of the members last week, and now they were barely 20. Barely because Lionel and Daniel made the number 20. The Rebellion Pack had over 150 werewolves under the command of Alpha Theo, and so could do more damage. The odds weren't in their favor. They all knew it. The ritual would demand them to stay still with their hands locked, despite the danger that would surround them. They would not move or break contact, at least not until the ritual was completed. It felt impossible. Perhaps this would be the toughest of the ritual yet, and the very thought terrified her. "Are you scared?" Aaron asked after a while of silence. "I'm always scared, but I guess this can't be more terrifying than everything I've been through." She chuckled. "The moon goddess didn't bring me back so I could die again." The few members left would be present, unlike the other two rituals. Their presence is necessary for the ritual and also for safety. They would keep a safe distance between us to give us privacy. "Ivan said this yesterday, but I didn't listen," she told him with a guilty look. In her defense, she was more interested in getting back to the last training and knocking Daniel out after he sliced her open like a melon with his sword during the second round. She knocked him off his feet as intended, and he told her she had mastered the control of her powers. Last week, as expected, they dedicated themselves to training, and Daniel didn't hold back, which helped her reflex ability. He told her he wasn't a teacher, but a fighter, and she told him she would learn from his fighting. She did. Daniel's relationship with everyone else at the Pack estate was rocky, but they learnt to trust him, and Ivan kept a close eye on him. She didn't want to conclude, but Ivan and Dale gave her a calm feeling, just like Ceci and Lionel did. She looked forward to a long-lasting friendship between them, or maybe more. Aaron laughed and nodded. "For what it's worth, this is the last ritual, and after this you're mine and I am yours, and there would no longer be a challenge or opposition from anyone." "I like the sound of that." She turned to face him and kissed his lips. The entire pack stood around the balcony of Aaron's house at the estate, all 20 of us. Aaron had a few things to say to everyone as his way of encouragement. He was still the alpha and as such owed it to his pack members, counting on him. "Tonight is the Crimson Moon, and by now every one of you knows what that's about. It's the final ritual to break the curse of power, and it's tonight. We also know that the Rebellion Pack will be here to bring war and wreak havoc because the last thing they need is me as the strongest alpha alive. They have pulled away as many as they can, but you stayed. Thank you for holding on to your faith in me. I know the odds aren't in our favor. The Rebellion Pack outnumbers us 10-1, but we that are left will fight. We will not surrender." The members cheered, howling and roaring to support everything he said. "Do not expect me to fight for you. I have one goal and one goal only. Once I have accomplished my goal, I'm done," Daniel said from the crowd, and everyone turned to him. "And how will you be done when the war isn't over? You certainly haven't seen a pack war before," Ivan answered. "I haven't, and I'm sure neither have you." Ivan exhaled. "I have. I am the wise one I have seen in the past, just like I can move and see into the present. I have seen a pack war, and it isn't as you think," he answered. "You only get to leave when all this is over." "Is that a threat?" Daniel demanded, stepping forward. "No, it's a fact." Damore growled, clearly not ready for their constant arguments. "Get over yourselves already. We have a war before us. Once we are done with that, you can fight each other." "It's setting," Zera said with a heavily beating heart as she stared at the crimson moon in the night sky at its peak. She turned to Aaron, who seemed to have seen that as well. "The barrier I placed around the estate cannot last any longer than 10 minutes, Ivan informed them, walking away. "We will try to keep them back as hard as we can," Damore assured before walking away. "Please protect Lionel," was what Zera could say. Yes, he wanted to fight this war, but she didn't plan to lose him either. Damore nodded before leaving. Aaron pulled out the silver dagger from its scabbard as soon as they sat on the grass outside the open field, and he ran the silver dagger over both his palms and handed it to her. She took it but hesitated as she watched his blood gush out, setting fear in her. Summoning enough courage, she ran the blade through her palms and dropped it onto the grass. Pain and cold shot through the open wound to every part of her body, and it weakened her from the inside out. Aaron, who saw the rapid change in her, stretched his hand out and took hold of her. Their bleeding palms touched, and her hand warmed up almost immediately. She felt the flow of energy leaving his body into her, and she glanced at him, wondering if he felt it too, but the look on his face told her he did. Pain gushed through her hand to other parts of her body, and she groaned out, unable to help it. She stayed in unending pain for the first minute that went by. Her head dropped and a groan left her mouth as cold gripped her skin. Yet she didn't let go of his hand. After the first minute, the wave of pain swept by, and the balance of power sets in. The balance of power banished the cold away, and soon after, the weakness followed, and her bones and muscles received strength. She had never felt the impact of the other ritual as she did this one, and she figured was because this, unlike the others, had to do with blood. They held on to each other's hands, sitting on the ground and staring at each other, waiting for the perfect moment to let go. Ivan had said their blood would heal when the ritual was complete, and she had no reason to worry, but she didn't know how that would work. Now, with her hands in Aaron's, she could feel the fibers of her hands pulling together and healing themselves. It was the most exceptional experience, and she was living it. Her eyes lingered on his before straying away from his rosy lips, beckoning to her. She wanted to lean in and kiss his lips. She wanted to run her tongue over his bottom lips and taste the sweetness thereof. "Stop, Zera, you're making me want to break this hold." Aaron snapped at her, and she narrowed her brows at him, not knowing what she did. "I can read your thoughts," he told her. "Since when can he read my thoughts?" she wondered to herself. "Since now," he answered. "Shit." "Yeah." "Can I read yours?" she asked curiously, already excited. "I wouldn't know," he answered, and her face dropped. "What, you should be able to. You're a sage, and this is the first time a sage mates with a werewolf. If you were a werewolf, I would have had the answer." "Oh," she pouted, sad she might never be able to read him. "I know," he answered, still reading her thoughts. "The ritual is almost complete," he informed her, and she could also feel it too. They were so close to finishing the ritual, and she couldn't be happier. Knowing she wouldn't lose Aaron as fast as she thought she would before was a blessing, and she wanted to flip the chapter on what awaited them next. Her mouth opened to speak, but she didn't get to. She saw an arrow flying straight from behind and coming towards Aaron's back. Zera's eyes widened in panic, and Aaron must have seen the look on her face or felt the arrow coming because he moved, and the silver tip arrow pierced through his side. He grunted in pain, but didn't let go because if he did, the ritual would be over. For the rebellion pack to be in the field meant they had broken through Ivan's hold somehow, and had pushed their way through the members of the pack, defending the estate and territory. Her heart went out to everyone, especially Lionel, but she was also worried about herself and Aaron. Another arrow flew towards him the next second, and it pierced into his shoulder, making him groan out in pain, much more than the first. Blood ran down his pierced shoulder, but he held onto her hand tighter than before. Her heart clenched in pain, seeing Aaron in much pain because of this, and she wanted to do something, but knew as much as protecting themselves was important. The ritual too was. They had to stay still with their hands entwined, acting like the world around them wasn't in chaos. It won't be long now. She knew this. She spotted about 5 figures moving out of the shadow and approached them, and they didn't look like friends. Her heart doubled, and she feared for the very worst with every step they took. She was scared. If the ritual was complete, then Aaron would be able to take on as many of them that came against him, but if not, they were doomed. With her disoriented mind, she couldn't tell how far the ritual had gone or know if their palms had healed up. Aaron's gaze stayed locked on her weary ones, but he remained calm despite the pain of the incoming danger. 7, he muttered under his breath, and she wondered what he meant. 6, he continued. 5. Her eyes darted to the 5 men, 2 with glowing red eyes and 3 with yellow eyes still approaching them, and her heart raced rapidly. These 4 were the other Alpha who had sided with Alpha Theo to take down the Dominio pack, but Alpha Theo was nowhere to be found. 4. The men were so close now, and letting her fear lead. She wanted to pull her hand from his and move on to attack them, but he tightened his grip around her, stilling her. 3, 2. His eyes fluttered. One of the men behind Aaron with yellow eyes drew his bow and fired 2 arrows having sharp silver heads towards them. 1. Aaron's lashes fluttered, and his eyes blazed a bloody red as he said the last word. He let go of her hand and turned around to back her. He caught the arrow flying towards him with both hands and threw them back at two of the men who approached. They fell and the rest four stormed towards them faster. Zera turned around and found 3 men approaching her, their eyes glowing blue. "Keep your back to mine," he commanded, and she didn't know if she would obey, because 3 werewolves moved to attack her. They launched forward, and she ran towards them, taking a few cuts which healed up, but ripping their hearts out and watching them drop to the floor, dead. "Are you okay?" Aaron yelled out as he slammed the last alpha he fought with on the ground. Zera stared at her bloody hands and her heart raced in her chest, not from fear, but delight. "I'm fine." "Good," he said, and ripped out the heart of the one on the ground. Just then Daniel, Ivan, Ceci de Moore, and Lionel, and a few other members of Dominio's pack ran into the open field where Aaron and Zera were. Lionel's arm was bleeding and Zera took hold of his hand, fearing a werewolf had scratched him. He noticed the look on her face and shook his head. "I fell and cut it open. I'm all right." "We couldn't hold them off," de Moore informed Aaron, who he stood beside, in a tone of disappointment. "You did well." He commended him before asking, "Is everyone all right?" "Yes," they answered in unison. "Did you complete the ritual?" Ivan asked. Aaron nodded. "Yes. Remember, all we need is Theo. Once he's dead, the pack will scatter," he informed them. "Alpha Aaron Hart, we meet again," the infuriating voice of Theo said, stepping into the open field along with Nicole and 3 other werewolves. "Theo," Aaron growled, "I told you once, crossing territories on a full moon is forbidden. And who's going to put me in my place?" he mocked, his eyes turning red. Aaron stepped forward. "I am." Theo smirked. "As predictable as I thought, you might have completed the ritual to make you the strongest alpha, but something is stronger than even the strongest alpha, and that's a legion of alphas. You're barely an alpha. All the members of your pack either ran away or are dead." He was getting under Aaron's skin and getting him angrier. "Did you come to talk or fight?" he roared, his hands growing into sharp claws. "Oh, I didn't come to fight. I came to kill," he answered. "I hope you readied yourself, because I didn't come alone," he said, and about a dozen of his pack members made themselves known from behind, spreading out to show their faces, and another dozen soon after. The members of the rebellion pack immediately surrounded them in the open field, and their numbers were over 50, from what they could see. "Where's Tosin?" Zera asked, not being able to place his face from amongst the crowd. Aaron pointed to the left-hand side of Theo, and there was the red-haired bastard Zera had had at the back of her mind each day she trained in the last week. To get to him, she knew she would have to get through the other werewolves before her, and she was ready. The fight started, and everyone moved to either defense or offense. Lionel, who held a gun with silver bullets, fired and shot down anyone that came close to him. Zera fought her way through the tugging crowd, trying to get to Tosin, when someone shoved her to the ground with force. She glanced up and saw Nicole. Her teeth gritted, and for a moment she saw red. Nicole stepped forward, towering above her. "I thought we were done with you? You're even harder to kill than a cockroach. I guess I have to finish up what Alpha Theo couldn't." Zera raced up to her feet, ready for the attack. "You're not who I want, at least not now, but I will go through you if I have to," she said, and the witch's eyes flared red and they ran through to attack each other. Zera groaned out in pain when Nicole dug her claws into her shoulders and her eyes glowed silver. She shoved Nicole off and the force sent her flying and crashing to the ground. "Silver. So it's true. You're a sage." Nicole spoke as she got up and surged towards her, but Daniel stepped up before Zera, and this slowed Nicole down. "You don't get to die by her hands, you die by mine," he said, and pulled his silver sword out from its sheath, having exhausted his arrows. Nicole laughed and took a step back, and over a dozen werewolves ran to cover up before her. Daniel and Zera moved to attack, and as he fought his way to Nicole, she fought her way to Tosin. Zera tore through and ripped apart those who came up against her, leaving no one alive. Her fist collided with Tosin's jaw as soon as she got to him, and not anticipating the attack, the impact sent him off his feet. He crashed onto the floor, but sat up quickly and spat out blood. His eyes narrowed at Zera, surprised at the attack and probably wondering who she was. "Get up," she shouted at him. He did as she told him. "I'd like to know who I am up against." he said and spat out more blood from his mouth. You didn't show the same kindness to Levi Adams, the man you killed like a coward. His eyes widened at the mention of the name, and she charged at him. Her attacks were quick and fierce, and although fast, Tosin couldn't escape them. Tosin was on his knees with blood running down his mouth and face within 2 minutes. Zera's attacks were too fierce to counter, and she shredded him like a wounded animal. She walked up to him and grabbed a fist full of his red hair. You do not deserve a quick death, so think of this as mercy. She pulled his head back and thrust her hand into his chest. She pulled out his heart, and his lifeless body dropped to the ground. She tossed his heart on the ground, but she didn't feel better. It changed nothing. Her father was still dead, and so was Tia, and vengeance didn't bring them back. However, she consoled herself with the fact that those who hurt them would never harm another again. Nicole attacked Daniel, and he hastened to defend himself with his sword. She swung at him a few times with her claws to cut him through, but he ducked and protected himself. You've gotten strong. I'm surprised you're alive and impressed, because I always thought you were as weak as they came. She spat on the ground, just like your mother. His teeth gritted, and he surged forward. Angry, he failed to calculate his steps, and Nicole took advantage, tearing the skin off his ribs with her claws. He fell to the ground, grunting in pain. Whatever made you think you could fight me? She demanded, stepping forward and shaking her head. Say hello to your mother for me. She drew her hand to slash him through, but Zera dashed over to her and stopped her hand so she could not do the havoc she intended. Nicole turned around and found her, and confusion flashed in her eyes. Zera flung her across the field in a second, and she crashed onto the ground. Are you okay? She asked Daniel, who nodded despite the blood running down his lips. She's mine! I get to finish her, he grunted in pain. He picked up his sword from where he dropped it and walked up towards her. He tightened his grip around his sword and attacked, and Zera moved to fight off the other wolves that tried to stop him. His revenge was for her as it was for himself, and so was this war. Daniel's blade did damage to Nicole and cut through her shoulder, and she cried out and dropped to her knee. He kicked her onto her back and lifted his blade to thrust her through with it. Please don't kill me, Nicole begged with fear-filled eyes. You don't deserve to live. Daniel told her and thrust his sword into her heart, snuffing the life out of her. After Nicole's death, Zera returned to Aaron's side to finish what they had started. Daniel lost balance and dropped to his feet despite the werewolf surging towards him to attack. Ivan and Lionel ran towards Daniel, and Ivan used his magic to throw a few off while Lionel shot at them. He got to where Daniel knelt and helped him up. Can you stand? He asked, his eyes searching Daniel's weak ones. I'll live, he grunted, sounding rude. He leaned his weight on the sword and rose to his feet. The least you can do is to be nice. We came to your aid. I didn't ask you for your help. I am a hunter. It's what I'm trained to do, and I am prepared to die if that is the case. Such a foolish way to live. Death isn't the worst thing that can happen in life. I would know. I have felt it around for years. Ivan said, blasting the werewolf about to attack them off. Where does it hurt? Ivan asked, his eyes already searching over Daniel's body. Daniel pointed to his left rib, and he placed his hand on the spot. The pain began to subside, and he felt as if he didn't feel so much pain before. How is it now? He inquired curiously. Better, Daniel answered, his voice less pain. Thank you, he shook his head. It isn't a cure, just a temporary fix until this is over. Carry your sword, Mr. Spear. This isn't over yet. Are you going to send all these people to their death, or will you step up and end this? Aaron yelled at Theo, who stood at the back watching the slaughter with an amused look on his face. If I were you, I would focus on the task at hand. Aaron ripped out the heart of the one who just attacked him and tossed it into the ground before racing to attack Theo. Ivan sent a blasting spell to the werewolf about to attack him, and it sent him off, flying and crashing to the ground. When the werewolf rose, Daniel thrust his sword into his heart. Lionel's gun ran out of bullets and was taken down before he could reload. Ceci ran to save him, pulling and fighting them off. She gave Lionel her hand, he took it, and she helped him up. Are you hurt? She asked, and when he shook his head she pushed him behind. Stay behind me. but the more she fought, the harder they pushed. Aaron thrust into the chest of the third wolf in his path and yanked out his heart, dropping and tossing it to the floor as if it was nothing. "Can you take me to him?" Aaron asked Ivan, staring at Theo, who stood a few feet behind, having more than a dozen of his pack members serving as barricades. Ivan nodded without even considering it and stretched both hands out after chanting a spell of separation. It was a difficult spell and blood ran down his nose, 10 seconds into chanting. He succeeded and took out all the werewolves before Theo and Aaron took advantage. Zera followed behind him. Ivan, who used the last strength he possessed, dropped to the ground unconscious, having exceeded his capacity. Damor raced over to stand before the now unconscious Ivan and protect him from those coming to end him. "I think it's high time you and I put an end to this, don't you think?" Theo smirked and stormed forward. But before he would reach Aaron, an older man stepped forward and blew into his palm. The purple content thereon flew and covered Aaron's face up, burning his skin and sinking deep inside. Wolfsbane. Theo took advantage of the brief distraction and tackled Aaron onto the floor with a hard smash of his fist and got on top of him. Theo's claws shot out, long and sharp, and he thrust them towards his chest to rip out his heart. But Aaron stopped him and threw him from on top of him. Aaron rose to his feet, grunting in anger. "Coward!" he hissed, and the old man who had blown the wolfsbane earlier stepped up from behind to blow another. But Zera, who saw him, dashed over to him. He picked up Zera's quick steps and turned around, blowing the content in his hands at her, but was shocked to see nothing happened. "I am not a werewolf," she told him, and snapped his neck in a second. He fell to the ground, dead. "No!" Theo cried out in anguish as he saw the lifeless body of the old man lying on the ground. Aaron gave him no moment to recover because he speeded to him, catching him by his jacket and delivering punches over and over to him. Aaron slammed Theo onto the ground and was about to finish him when he got swamped by werewolves attacking. He tore through them and spotted Theo retreating, but he couldn't have that. He had to finish this here and now. Yet his pack needed him to fight off the rebellion pack attacking. "Go! I've got this!" Zera told him with a supporting nod. He chased after Theo and his retreating crew of 2 alphas and 6 betas. He attacked the betas first, being faster and stronger. He picked them away from their crew one after the other without making a sound, and soon only the 2 alphas were left with Theo. "Going somewhere?" he asked, stepping out of the shadow, his eyes blazing red. Theo's breath hitched in his throat, and he stepped back while the 2 alphas approached. "This is between me and him. You do not have to die for that," Aaron told them, but they were too gone to listen. Putting them down came just like breathing. Aaron tore through the chest of the first alpha and ripped out his heart, and the other he snapped his neck. Again, he was left alone with Theo. "I told you before," Aaron spoke as he stepped forward, his eyes still glowing. "Crossing territories without a formal invitation is forbidden. And now you have shown me how wrong I was to have done that," Theo said with a weary smile. "Perhaps you could be the better man and let it go," he said, trying to reason for the first time since this war started. "Time for understanding is past," Aaron answered, and flew towards Theo with a furious snarl. Zera blocked the thrust of the claw of the werewolf attacking and was about to deliver a punch, but someone hauled him off her and tossed him onto the ground. She spun around and found Aaron behind her with blazing red eyes, and she paused, unable to look away. He barely looked stressed out, almost like he did nothing, but she knew he did. He would not be back if he didn't finish what he went to do. He glanced at her, and she almost saw a smile on his face before he looked away to those still brawling. "Alpha Theo is dead," he thundered, and the fighting ceased immediately, and all eyes turned to him. "I ripped this out of his chest," he announced, and lifted the heart in his hand up so everyone could see before tossing it to the ground. "This is over. Surrender or meet the same fate," he warned, and the entire field became still. "This is your last chance." The rebellion with his words retreated, choosing safety over a lost war. "Take him to the healing room," he instructed, pointing to Ivan, who was still unconscious on the floor. "Both of them." He pointed to Daniel, who was now on his knees. Damor nodded, and while he carried Ivan away, Ceci and Lionel supported Daniel, As the five left the field, Aaron turned his attention to Zera, his eyes back to its hazel. She glanced around at the pile of bodies on the open field. "I'll have nightmares about this night for a long time." His eyes dropped in remorse at her words. "I am sorry." She shook her head. "I am not. It had to be done." He lifted his hand to stroke her face tenderly. "I will be here to support and help you get over it the best way I can." She knew he meant it. A lot happened in the last week. The rebellion pack's defeat spread like wildfire, and the members of the Dominio pack who had run away for safety returned. In the last 6 days, they have been coming in their 10s and 20s, stating the reason they fled to be the fear of death and asking for another chance. The Dominio pack welcomed them back, and they put the past in the past with the hope of a better future. The pack's victory established them once again as the strongest pack, and their fear spread through the countries near and far. Now the other pack wanted to stay on their good side and offer a truce and gifts of friendship. Ivan was in a much better shape, and his magic helped heal him up faster. Daniel's healing was slower with no magic, but the hearts created the healing room with healing magic that worked at a slow pace. Ivan couldn't help. He said disrupting the natural healing of Daniel's body, aided by the healing room, would affect him in the long run, and it was best he stayed there until he got healed. Daniel didn't like that idea, but he had no choice. He had healed up in the last 6 days, and Zera, as well as the hearts, visited him frequently. This was their way of thanking him for everything he did, despite telling them he didn't do it for them. Today Zera visited and found him already dressed in new clothes and sitting on the bed. He looked all ready to leave. He never wanted to stay to begin with, and so 6 days was a miracle. "Daniel," she called out. His head lifted, and his eyes met hers. "Zera, you're leaving," she said what she saw. He nodded. "I've done my part, and now I'm better. I need to leave," he answered. "Oh," she muttered silently, "you can't stay any longer." "I could, but I am a hunter. I'm supposed to hunt supernatural beings, not make friends with them. The last 2 weeks had been a war against myself to not attack you and everyone else. I think this is best," he answered. "Can I leave, or are the barriers still up?" he asked, his eyes straying from Zera over to Ivan, who stood behind her. She turned around and found him at the door. "I already did. The minute the war ended, the barriers fell, and the only thing that had kept you here have been your own will. You can leave if you want to now," Ivan replied, and Daniel's teeth clenched. Ivan hadn't told him this truth in the last week since he was here, so he assumed the barriers were up. "You should have told me from the start. Then you would have left without being healed, and you would have died out there. I did you a favor." Zera turned her attention to him. "So you leave now?" His eyes softened at her words, but he nodded. "I can't stay here. I appreciate the care and treatment, but it still feels wrong for me." She stepped closer and threw her arms around him for a tight hug, and his eyes fluttered. "Thank you for everything you have done for me, from taking care of me, to training me, to fighting beside me." Daniel's arms wrapped around her. "You saved me. Thank you," he mumbled into the crook of her neck. "I should have done more, but I am glad I could help." "We will meet again," she told him, and that was a promise. "I hope we don't," he answered and turned to glance at Ivan. "Thank you, witch." Ivan rolled his eyes. "It's wise one, not witch asshole." Daniel smiled, and this was the first time he had done that while in the same room with Ivan. "Wise one." He nodded in acknowledgement and took the correction. "Do not watch over me when I'm gone. You can't tell me what to do," Ivan shot back. Daniel took a step towards him, and his heart picked up its beat. They were almost the same height. Ivan stood a few inches taller, but Daniel had a broader build and a terrifying stance. "Do not watch over me when I'm gone," he repeated, this time firmer. Ivan nodded. "Fine then, I won't." Daniel smirked, stepped back, and Ivan dragged a deep breath. With one last glance at Zera, he departed. Zera stood at the entrance of the now empty field, her heart beating slowly as she reminisced about everything. She had come every day since the pack war happened, spending at least an hour before leaving. It's been a week, but it felt like yesterday. The bodies were gone, and so was the blood and its smell. Thanks to Ivan, it felt almost as if nothing happened, and the field looked as new as it looked before the war happened. However, the memories of the blood on her hands and her body, the death and destruction they inflicted on their enemies, didn't leave. They deserved it because they had attacked them, but that didn't stop the nightmare from coming. Aaron held her close every night, just like he promised he would, and hadn't left her side yet. His love had done so much for her, some of which she couldn't remember. Counseling started yesterday, and it went well. Aaron asked while he made love to her last night if she considered returning to work now that the war was over. It was something that hadn't crossed her mind until he said it, and she promised to think about it and get back to him. With the war over, it meant Zion would have a normal life, and she would too, despite them being anything but normal now. It was good to no longer have to live in fear. That was the world she always wanted, the world her father couldn't give her, one she couldn't give Tia. Wherever they were, she knew they were happy and together. She heard footsteps from behind, and having heard the pace and weight of it on the ground so many times, she knew who they belonged to. Aaron. Her heart beat slowly against her chest, picking up its beat with every step he took until he came to stand behind her. "You're here again," she sighed. "I can't escape it." He placed his hands on her shoulder, and she leaned against him. "You're not supposed to escape it. You're to live through it." Her counselor said almost the same thing. It was a massacre. "It was," he agreed, leaning in and kissing her hair. "It was also necessary. We gave everyone a choice." "We did." Her lashes fluttered as she exhaled deeply. "So what now? Now we move towards a better future filled with hope and dreams." She liked the thought of that. They returned inside with their hands entwined. "Mommy," Zion called, racing towards her with a rose flower in his hand and a wide smile on his face. Zera smiled at the adorable little angel she had as a son. She released Aaron's hand and bent to pick Zion up into her arms. He giggled as she placed her head against his. He had gone out with Ceci on a day trip, which involved shopping, beauty treat, and sightseeing. He looked so excited in the early hours of the morning, and Zera didn't stop him. "How did your day with Ceci and Uwa go?" she asked with a curious voice as he set him down on his feet. Ceci and Uwa approached. "Good, Mommy. I got this for you," he said, and handed her the rose flower in his hand. Oh, her eyes warmed as she took the flower from him. "You got me a flower?" He shook his head. "I didn't. Daddy said to get you one so he can do that." He pointed to the back where Aaron stood, and Zera turned around, only to find Aaron on one knee with a black box in his hand staring at her. She gasped and took a step back, not believing her eyes. "I know the circumstances are not the best, but I am tired of carrying this box around and not being able to ask," he began. "I love you, Zera Adams, and I will die loving you. You're my joy, my world, my mate, and everything I need is right here. So here I am on my knees asking, will you spend eternity with me?" A tear ran down her face, but she wiped it off and nodded. "Yes, I will." She gave him her left hand, and he slid the ring onto her finger. She heard cheers from up the balcony, and gazing up, she found the Hart twin and Lionel beside the railing looking down at what was happening. They were all in on it, even Zion, and it was amazing how well it was planned out. "I love you, Zera. I know, and I love you too." She closed the space between them to kiss his lips, smiling when she heard louder cheers, but not pulling away. The end.